Namaste everyone, welcome to my channel. This is the third video of the Sudarshan Sir's Physical Geography Revision series, and today I'm going to be doing the revision video of all the theories from continental drift theory to plate tectonics. So let's get started. So we start with the continental drift theory. As we all know that the continental drift theory was actually given by Alfred Wegener, who was a German meteorologist, and he actually gave the theory in 1912. He basically had gone to Antarctica to do some research on climate change and impacts of industrialization and industrial revolution on the climate. And while he was there, he actually came across some fossils in Antarctica. And he found it really surprising because it is very difficult to find life in Antarctica, and came to a conclusion that the continents are moving and they are basically not, they have not always been in the places that they are at this particular time. So basically that's how he came up with the idea of continental drift theory. So he said that the continents are drifting. Drifting basically means very slow movement. So he actually said that the continents must be moving very slowly, and they might still be moving, but since the movement is very slow, we do not understand it. And he gave a theory that some 225 million years ago there was one mega continent called Pangaea. Pangaea basically means all landmass in German, and it must be surrounded by a mega ocean called Panthalassa, and that also means the same in German. And he said that the continent, basically that one mega continent Pangaea, it must have broken down into first two pieces some 135 million years ago. The two pieces, the topmost part he called it Laurasia, and the bottom part he called as Gondwana land. And the new sea that was formed in between, he named it as Tethys Sea. And basically he said that the continents kept breaking into more pieces after that, and it drifted apart to the places that they are right now. And basically this is how he actually showed that this is Pangaea, and right here this is Panthalassa, this is Laurasia, and this is Gondwana land. This is right here is India, and India was basically part of the Gondwana land, and this is the Tethys Sea. So that is the new sea formed between Gondwana land and Laurasia. And now India is right here. This is the present day. And this is how the position of the continents are at this particular time. To prove his theory, he basically came up with different evidences. So let us look at some of these evidences. The first evidence that he talked about was the jigsaw fit. Basically, he said that right here is the jigsaw fit. So he said that if you look at the South America, and this is the South America part, if you can understand, and this is the Africa continent. So if you see the coastlines right here, they kind of match so much that it's like a jigsaw fit. So that was one of the evidences he gave, that that must mean that they might be the same at one point of time. It might be part of the same landmass at one point of time. Another evidence that he gave was that of the Appalachian Mountains. So basically if you see that these are the Appalachian Mountains in the North America, and these are the Scandinavian mountains. So what he said was that when he tried to figure it out, he found out that these are all the rocks and the ranges of these two mountains are of the same age, and the rocks are also of the same type, and basically all of this must have been formed as a single mountain range, and now since they have drifted apart, they are like this. But otherwise this also kind of looks like a jigsaw fit. So that was another evidence that he gave. The third evidence he gave was about to prove that these two must be of the same landmass, part of the same landmass. He talked about the age of rocks, age and type of rocks along this coastline. So he actually tried to find out if the age and the type of rocks along these coastline is the same or not, and he found out that they are indeed the same. One more evidence for these two being the same landmass was that of the placer deposits. So in the Ghana area of Africa, right here, there was gold deposits found, and it said that the veins, that the source of that gold particularly was coming from here. So that's why it's those and it's very rarity that now currently the positions are here. So basically right here is the Atlantic Ocean. So right now it is not possible to imagine that the gold must have traveled all the way to Atlantic to settle over here. So it must be part of the same landmass. So that was another evidence that he gave. The next evidence was that of the tillite deposits. So tillite deposits are basically the sediment, basically the leftovers, the sediments of glaciers, and those are called the tillites. So they appear somehow like this. So tillite is basically a sedimentary rock with such deposits, and these are all glaciated deposits. And he found that in all of this region he found tillite deposits, and they were all of same type and similar composition. So that was another thing that he found. The next evidence that he gave was really amazing, because he gave evidence of the fossils. So he said that this Mesosaurus, he found that the fossil of Mesosaurus was found here in the South American region as well as in the African region. Now it is not possible for this reptile to travel all across Atlantic and to also exist there. So it could be either at one place or the other, but it was found in both the places, which meant that it must be in the same because it must be the same landmass. This is one more Lystrosaurus. That was also another fossil that he found in all of these three regions. So again, it must mean that it must be the same landmass. So these were the evidences that he gave, but his theory had a drawback. The drawback being that he was not able to explain the forces that were, that would explain the drifting of the continents. So the forces that he used to explain the drifting of the continents were these two forces. One being the pole fleeing force, which meant that the force which forced the continents to move towards the poles. So that was one force that he used, and another force he said was the tidal force. So basically the force generated by the combined gravity of sun and the moon. But these forces were really unsatisfactory, because they couldn't explain, because these forces cannot be he couldn't basically explain the origin of this particular force, and he couldn't explain that this force was strong enough to actually move continents up that farther apart. So that's why the theory failed. But people couldn't discard the evidences that he showed. So basically from there another geographer basically picked up, and he was Arthur Holmes. He basically explained the drifting of the continents through his convectional current theory. In the asthenosphere, there are radioactive elements, and they create thermal difference within the asthenosphere. And because of such thermal difference, such temperature difference, there's heat in the asthenosphere, and such heated up material basically rises up. And that part, since it rises up, this part is empty, and these from here it tries to fill it up, and this is how basically a circle is formed, and the entire material in the asthenosphere keeps rotating like this, and it moves. And since that it is moving below the lithosphere, and lithosphere is basically floating on top of the asthenosphere, lithosphere also moves as a result of it. And that is how we basically explain the movement of the different continents. So after that theory came the third theory, which is the seafloor spreading theory. So basically all the theories so far did not concentrate on the seafloor, and so Harry Hess, he basically wanted to focus on seafloor and the different reliefs found on the bottom of seafloor. So he actually researched on that, and in 1960 he came up with a seafloor spreading theory, where he focused primarily on how the sea floor is basically formed. So he said that if the continents are moving apart from one another, that means that there is a formation of new sea floor. So he basically researched on how that was happening, where he believed that the convectional currents, they were responsible of moving the lithosphere apart from one another, and since it were moving, a rift was basically formed in between. There was a fault and there was a rift which allowed the magma inside the asthenosphere to escape, and since that escaped right here, it basically formed ridges, and he named it mid-oceanic ridges. So to explain his theory, he basically gave two evidences. The first evidence that he gave was that of the age of the rock on either side of the rift. So he said that if this is the ridge, and if you move further away from the ridge, you will find that right here the closest to it will be the youngest of rocks, and as you keep moving further, you will find that the rocks are becoming older, and farthest near the subduction zone rocks are the oldest here. And he also observed that the rocks on both sides of the ridge, equal distance, if you check, you will find that the rocks of here and here are of same age, same went with here and here, same age, and same went with here and here, same age. The next evidence that he gave was that of the paleomagnetism. So paleomagnetism basically relates to the alignment of the minerals in rocks to the Earth's magnetic field. So the rocks basically have some ferrous minerals which are attracted towards the Earth's magnetic field, and currently the Earth's magnetic field is such that its magnetic north pole is aligned to its geographic south pole. So basically accordingly the minerals within the rocks, the new seafloor that is formed is going to be aligned. But the Earth's magnetic field keeps reversing. It has stayed the same since last 60,000 or so years, but it has also been proved that it has reversed at least 170 times in last 76 million years. This is the polarity at this point of time. And then when it kind of drifted further away in some more years, after some more years, its polarity had changed. So if you see that this is the reverse magnetic polarity, so it's always alternate, if we can see here. So that was one more reason that he was able to find out that it was not made in one day, and the fact that seafloor has expanded and it is comparatively younger than the continental crust. So oceanic crust is younger than the continental crust. And another thing that we can understand through this theory is that basically this is the seafloor is made of magma which comes from the asthenosphere, and asthenosphere is basically part of the mantle, which is primarily formed from SiMa and not Sial. SiMa stands for silica and magnesium, and that is why the ocean floor is also made of SiMa, because that's its core material, right? So that was something that we can derive from this. But so this was his seafloor spreading theory. But again, his theory also had some drawbacks, especially being that of not being able to explain other formations on the lands. And so this theory, while it made a lot of sense, but it was not a complete theory on its own. And so we moved to the next theory, which is the ultimate theory, and that is the plate tectonic theory. So plate tectonic theory, to understand that, we need to understand few things first. First thing being that plate basically means a lithospheric slab. And there are two types of plates. First is the continental plate and then the oceanic plate. These lithospheric plates are basically floating on asthenosphere, and the asthenosphere is moving constantly, so the plates are also moving on top of it. And because it's moving, it has a chance to interact with each other. And these plates basically interact with one another in these three forms. First is convergence, then there's divergence, and there's transform. These interactions can be identified on the basis of the landforms found at the plate boundaries. These interactions basically happen at ocean boundaries, then there's continent boundaries, and then there's ocean and continent boundaries. And then we also need to understand that if there is an interaction ever between an ocean and a continent boundary, then oceanic plate is always going to go under, because oceanic plate is the one which is heavier than the continental plate. So these are the few basics that we need to understand, and we move to the first interaction, that is the convergence of ocean and continent. So when we talk about convergence between an ocean and a continent, we need to understand, as I said earlier, that oceanic plate is going to be heavier. So as the ocean, and we are talking about convergence, so basically it is moving closer to one another. So as convergence is basically moving closer, what happens is that oceanic plate is going to be heavier, and that is why it is going to go down. Now we need to understand the fact that continental plate is often going to have a lot of sediments. Sediments basically left because of the rains and the rivers, and these sediments accumulate at the ocean on the ocean floor, right close to the continent. So basically it's going to come in between the boundary, and what happens is that such sediments over the years, they are so much, and such sediments are actually called geosyncline. And such sediments are lifted up during such convergence, and they lift up and they form fold mountains. So these are the fold mountains, and since they are forming the fold mountains, another thing that happens is at this time that since the oceanic plate is moving under and it is subducting, it is going in that hot zone where it is going to melt again, and since it is melting here, it's going to create undue pressure right here. As such, any which ways, there is no space for more magma, but since it is going down anyway, and it is going to melt, it's going to create undue pressure, and because of that, these mountains are going to be of volcanic origin. So they are going to have volcanism, and they are going to be fold mountains. One more feature that we need to look at during such convergence is that of this trench. So basically what happens is, as the oceanic plate goes down and the geosyncline rises up, and right here is the fold mountain, there is this tiny space from where the oceanic plate is subducting. So this dip that is formed, this dip is called the trench. So we can find the example of such interaction right here at the Andes, and even at the Rockies for that matter. Moving on to the next interaction, we are going to talk about the ocean-ocean convergence. So in ocean and ocean convergence, there is an absence of geosyncline because there is no continental plate. So because of that, fold mountains are not going to form. But again, similarly here too, although there are two oceanic plates, one plate is eventually going to be a little bit heavier than the other one. So the heavier plate subducts, and again there is undue pressure formed over here, and because of that volcanism happens, and a kind of mount is formed, which is again a volcanic in origin, but it is not a fold mountain. But as long as such a mountain is inside the water body, it is going to be called as the sea mount. But if it manages to rise above the water level, it forms an island. And generally what happens is that as the plate keeps moving, it basically forms series of island, and it's called actually an island arc. Example to such island arcs are found in this particular region. One of the most famous example is going to be that of Japan right here, and all of these areas, like even in the Indonesia. These are the Indonesian islands, and right here is the Aleutian Islands. So all of these islands are actually right here. If we see, they're all actually formed because of such volcanism, and they are basically formed because of ocean-ocean convergence, and because of that, this area is known for its violent earthquakes and a lot of volcanic eruptions all the time, and which is why it is also called as the Ring of Fire. So moving on to the next interaction is convergence between continent and continent. So in this kind of convergence also there is a subduction, because in convergence there has to be a subduction. But since both the plates are continental plates, the plate is lighter in nature, which is why it is not going to go extremely below, and it's not going to get to the asthenosphere. It's still going to stay above it, and which is why it is not going to melt, and so there is not going to be any volcanism here. So there is no volcano here for sure, but there's subduction, and which is why, and also since it's a continental plate, there is going to be a geosyncline. Geosyncline means that there's going to be fold mountains. And another thing that we need to know is that the plate that is moving below here, from here there's a fold mountain, but since this plate is moving under this plate is also going to rise up a little, and which is why here it's going to form a plateau. And this is a very classical example that we see here in India. So in India, for example, if we go to the map right here, so India has moved to the India, as we had seen earlier, that it moved from here and it formed Himalayas by interacting with the Asian plate. So it formed Himalayas right here, and along with that, what has happened is that right here even Tibetan plateau was formed. So this is the very classical example of this particular type of interaction between two plates. Anyway, so here is a very quick revision table. So if we see that if there is a continent-continent kind of interaction, we are not going to find any volcanism, but we are going to find a fold mountain. Earthquakes are also going to be there, but trench is not going to be there, because even though there is a dip, it is going to be filled up by the sediments. And so you can't actually see the trench, and you can't actually see the subduction zone. So this is going to be absent. If we move to the ocean-ocean interaction, ocean-ocean convergence, we will see that here we are going to see volcano, yes, but there are not going to be any fold mountains. However, we will see that there are earthquakes and there is going to be a trench, which is why we see that there is the Sunda Trench, there's a Java Trench. And when it comes to the interaction between ocean and continent, and especially when it comes to convergence, so here there is going to be a volcano for sure. Fold mountain, yes, because there is a continental plate, so there is going to be a geosyncline. Earthquakes, certainly, and since it's an ocean, there's also going to be a trench. So when we summarize it, we understand that if we want to have a fold mountain can happen only if at least one plate is continental, otherwise fold mountain is not going to form. Also, volcano happens only if at least one plate is oceanic, otherwise volcanoes cannot form. And trenches also needs at least one oceanic plate, otherwise a trench will also not form. But earthquakes are formed in all of these interactions. So moving on to a different kind of interaction, which is divergence. Divergence, we already saw the ocean-ocean interaction, where because of the convectional current, the ocean floor basically keeps moving apart, and because of that there is formation of new ocean floor in form of mid-oceanic ridges. So I'm not going to repeat that again. The next type of divergence that we see is continent-continent divergence. So continent-continent divergence, when that happens, what happens first is, formation of a fault or a rift, and first, you'll find a small fault on the continent floor, and then eventually when it moves a little bit further away, we find a rift valley. So what happens with that is, because these two becomes a raised area and gravity has pulled this part down over here, and this is the raised area. These are kind of like a block mountains, and right here is the Rift Valley. In the Rift Valley, often what happens is because of the rainfall or some or the other reason, initially there are lakes formed, and then eventually there could be a river flowing from the Rift Valley, and eventually with time, as more and more rifting occur, it could form a small sea, and then eventually as much more rifts occur, it could form an ocean. And an example of this is seen, all the stages actually can be seen across different areas of the earth. So if we see the first stage of the Rift Valley, where just the Rift Valley has formed and there are some lakes, we can find it in this region of Africa where there are multiple lakes that can be found on the Rift Valley. So that is one area where we can see the rifting. If we talk about formation of a river, that we can see in India right here in the Narmada River is basically flowing through the Rift Valley. So there are block mountains on both the sides, and in the Rift Valley, Narmada River is flowing. So that is one example. The third example is that of a sea. So Red Sea is an example of sea formed because of rifting. So since this part and this part is drifting apart, Red Sea has formed, and that's a classic example. And the ocean formation, Atlantic Ocean is the perfect example of formation because of the rifting, since we already saw in the continental drift theory that this used to be one landmass, and because of drifting this ocean is formed. So these are some of the examples of what happens when there is divergence continent-continent. The last kind of boundaries is that of transform boundaries. So I actually forgot to put up an example of how it basically moves. It is basically moving parallel to each other, but it could be moving in the opposite direction. So it is not colliding, and it is not even moving apart from one another. So there's not going to be any form of mountain or any form of volcanism, or even new form of formation of landforms or anything. All it's going to form is such a fault, and this is a classic example of such transform boundary, which is found in San Andreas in California. So these are some of the facts that we need to understand here, that when we say that convergence is happening between two plate boundaries, basically convergence forms destructive margins. So when there is a convergence, at least one plate is going to be subducting, and it is basically destroying that plate by getting melted, or basically that much floor is getting reduced. So that is destructive margin. And since in the convergence, the movement is going really deep, close to the asthenosphere a lot of times, but because of that, the earthquakes occurring at such convergent plate boundaries are going to be really deep earthquakes, and these earthquakes are more destructive in nature. Whereas when there is divergence, these margins are called constructive margins, because more often than not, it is forming new new sea floor. In divergence, also we need to understand that there is no subduction, therefore the earthquakes are going to be quite shallow. And in transform boundaries when there is a transform kind of interaction. There is no construction, there is no destruction, there is only conservate. These are conservative margins because it conserves the each plate's boundaries in the way they were before. But yes, because of the movement, earthquakes can occur. Moving on to the last part of plate tectonic theory is the drawback of plate tectonic theory. Plate tectonic theory, while explained how various landforms were formed at the plate boundaries across the world, it was not able to explain formation of volcanoes where there are no plate boundaries. They are basically, some of the volcanoes were found in the middle of the plates, not on the plate boundaries. So it was not able to explain this part. So this was one of the drawbacks of plate tectonic theory. So this was it for today. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you found this video useful. If you do find such videos useful, please comment and leave a thumbs up because it really encourages me. And if you've not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video.